Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Virtual Encounters. My name is Abhishek Mahajan. We have a very renowned guest today, five-time ICC Umpire of the Year, one of the best umpires cricket has ever seen, and the one who can forget he officiated in 2011 World Cup Finals, which India won at the Wankhede. Mr. Simon Toffel is with us today from Australia. Welcome, sir. Welcome to DD India. First of all, how have you been doing? And I need to ask you this. Did you watch India versus Pakistan match? And Pakistan buried the ghost. And India, what do you think went wrong for them?
Abhishek, look, thank you for that kind introduction. And look, quite frankly, I think India have had a pretty good run in World Cup campaigns against Pakistan. So perhaps they were due for a loss. But I think there were some wonderful takeaways, not only just the fact that a great atmosphere and a great contest, but probably some of those scenes after the match of mutual respect and some great sportsmanship being shown between the two teams was probably my highlight to take away from that fixture.
Right. You officiated in 2011 India versus Pakistan match, which was held in Mohali, the semi-final match, I remember. Tell us, you took it as just another match or no? Umpires are also under pressure when they are officiating in high-pressure game.
Yeah, look, I think we had probably two finals in that 2011 Cricket World Cup. We had the semi-final in Mohali, India-Pakistan. What a great contest that was again. Lots of media focus and lots of passionate fans looking to support their team. My approach on that day, just like the final, was to try and keep the focus really simple. Try to concentrate on my game. Try not to let too much of the external pressure affect me, and to really just bunker down with my teammates, the third team, the umpiring and refereeing team, and make sure that the fans and the spectators and the fanatics were going to remember the quality of cricket rather than the umpiring on the day.
Right. You also want to share the experience of officiating in the finals, India versus Sri Lanka at the Wankhede?
You know, for me, it was just wonderful and a great honour and privilege to be part of a final. I think having Australia lose early on in the competition gave me an opportunity to be selected for the final, which hadn't existed in my previous two World Cup final campaigns. Australia had been quite a successful team, and due to neutrality regulations, that sort of counted me out. But super excited and very privileged to be an Australian in the Cricket World Cup final.
Yeah, but best match you have officiated in?
Very tough to single out one particular match, but you tend to remember your first. Yeah. Like your first test match, which for me was Boxing Day, Melbourne, Australia and the West Indies. And also remember my last test match with great fondness. It was England and South Africa vying for number one in the world. And, look, to umpire on grounds like Eden Gardens, Wankhede, but also Cape Town, and to see the wonderful backdrop of Table Mountain. The SCG that we've got in the background there was lucky enough to do Australia versus the rest of the world in 2005. And so privileged to be part of, some wonderful legends of our game that we'll cherish for a long time.
First matches are always special. Simon, you were only 27 when you made your debut as an umpire in international cricket at very young age. But I want to ask you, when did you think of becoming an international umpire? What dragged you here? Were you always passionate about this role?
I'm passionate about cricket. I love the sport, but I started late as a player. I didn't start playing until about the age of 12. But I suppose my umpiring career, if I could call it that at that stage, was actually with Barry Knight. Now, Barry Knight, former England player, he owned an indoor cricket centre in a Sydney suburb where I played indoor cricket, and I started working there and doing some umpiring and earning $30 a night when I started out as a high school student. But I was more focused on playing than umpiring, and I suppose I'd describe myself as an accidental umpire. That when I had a back injury at the age of 20, after reaching a fairly good standard in junior cricket, I sort of looked at my options, and my fast bowling mate with my club side was hell bent on becoming an umpire, and he dragged me along to an umpiring course. We both sat the 4 nights, did the exam, And unfortunately, my mate, he failed the exam and I managed to pass it. And as a university student at that stage, I thought, well, this might be a good way to earn some extra money. So had it not been for a friend and a colleague, a fellow player dragging me along to an umpiring course, you and I would not be having this conversation. And something that was a hobby to a part-time job, then to a full-time job, it's been a tremendous journey so far.
But I need to say this for the benefit of our viewers. You umpired a total of 74 test matches during your career, officiated in 13 matches as a TV umpire. You also took part in 174 ODI matches and 34 T20Is during your long career. And being a third umpire, you officiated in 46 ODIs and 8 T20Is. But everyone wants to know, why did you leave umpiring at your peak at the age of just 41? You were literally at your peak.
Well, perhaps, and I think for me that is the right time to go. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Finding the Gaps, and I devoted a chapter about why I actually left cricket umpiring at that stage. And the chapter was called Use By Date. And I believe that everybody has a use by date in their particular job, in their particular role. And I certainly agree with the Shane Warne philosophy of people should ask, why did you go, rather than why don't you go? And for me, it was about leaving for two reasons primarily. One was personal. You know, I'd spent 13 years on the road away from my family and friends, and I missed my two boys growing up with so much time away from home. And I wanted to be able to see my daughter grow up. And there were professional reasons that, as you said, there's a lot of matches under my belt there. But I felt that I'd achieved a lot in umpiring, and I found a new passion in coaching and training and education, and that new passion was taking over. And I didn't want to, keep umpiring for the sake of numbers and for, trying to pass records or do things like that. It's tremendously interesting and pleasing to see Alain Dar, who started with the ICC back in 2003 when I did, still officiating. And that's a great credit to his, longevity. And, so look, everyone's got to use by date. And for me, I've moved on to bigger and better things, and I've done things I would never dreamt of doing while I was umpiring.
Consecutively from 2004 to 2008, you were named ICC Umpire of the Year and generally considered as the best umpire in the world during his time. But you were known for your accuracy, Simon. And this is what made you a household name also. We want to know from you, sir, you are the best person to answer this question. What are the challenges that umpires face, the pressure, the preparation, and what it takes to be a high-class, high-quality umpire?
Yeah, sure. Look, thank you for those kind words. I've certainly made plenty of mistakes in my career as well, and I've been incredibly lucky to grow up in the New South Wales environment and have such great mentors and fellow officials and people that I've stood with, and certainly they've passed on their experience and wisdom to me. And I think that's probably the first piece of advice that I give to people is to use the collective intelligence of your colleagues and peers and to really listen carefully to what they've got to say. We don't have time to make all the mistakes ourselves, so we can learn from the mistakes of other people. So I took great pride, I think, in trying to do the apprenticeship and not move too quickly through the system. Umpiring is all about mistakes. Umpiring is a team sport, and getting up there accepting those individual awards has been rather awkward and somewhat embarrassing at times because it's about team success, and that's part of the messaging that I work with people today, that you need to compete against yourself, but you also need to be successful as a team, and the umpiring team to be unnoticed, and we should not be the centre of attention. So for me, it's about working towards that team success, but coping with pressure is about making sure that you just keep it simple, that you really remain connected with the moment, that you trust all of your preparation and hard work, and that you try not to second guess and you follow your gut. A lot of us build up, like even in your job, you build up experience and knowledge, and you've got to learn to trust your judgment and trust your gut, and try not to worry about what other people think too much. Don't put extra pressure on yourself. And I think those qualities are really simple, but they're so important that sometimes cricket's a game that we make more difficult than it actually is. We overcomplicate the simple game.
Same goes with the players also. Just make it simple, like MS Dhoni says. But is it difficult to deal with excessive appealing also? Maybe from a bowler, sometimes the captains.
Well, it can be.
Difficult to handle. You want to share your experience?
It can be. My philosophy on appealing was I didn't worry too much about an appeal as long as the players respected my decision and they just got on with the game. I think when players work out that you're uncertain, that you're not confident, or that you can buckle under pressure, then I think you're likely to see more appealing happen at your end because they're going to try to get a decision to go in their favour. But for me, if you remain firm, calm, considered, confident, consistent, and you give it the way that you see it, you're more likely going to get appealing that is reasonable. But that doesn't stop, a lot of people from trying to get things to go their way. And let's face it, sport's about finding that edge and about exploiting every loophole to get things to go your way. So you're going to expect that to a certain extent, but you should never let it affect you.
That's right. So Simon, you were one of the officials involved in the terrorist attack on the Sri Lankan team bus in 2009 at Lahore. You were part of a 4-match official contingent. I'm sorry I'm raising this point, but again, you have mentioned this in your book also. You want to share your experience? Must still be giving you goosebumps.
Oh, look, it does. Look, even today, loud noises, lots of commotion, fireworks make me uncomfortable. It was a terrible day for Pakistan, 2009, March the 3rd. Terrible day for our Sri Lankan team participants, a terrible day for cricket and also for our people in our van. Again, I've shared the story in my book as chapter number 1. It's a chapter called The Hardest Call I've Had to Make. It was about not an LBW or a caught behind, but a telephone call that I made to my wife shortly after the incident. A very emotional time, a very sad time, but one that I wanted to share with readers around what I learnt during that terrible experience. People died in our vehicle. We lost our driver. Our son Raza, our 4th umpire, was shot twice in the chest. There were some events on that day that made me realise about what life was all about and about how we're all different and how we all see things from a different perspective. And that doesn't make us right or wrong. It just makes us different. And I also wanted to, I suppose, get people to think about umpires are people too. And it's really important that sometimes it's just a game of cricket, and I think we can take that game of cricket to a level where it's no longer a game. And I really wanted to just really get people to think about, well, there are 3 teams that play the game of cricket. Umpires were forgotten on that day for lots of different reasons. We didn't have our own resources to protect us or to look after us or even to come and save us. And I really wanted to get the message across that it's really important that we treat people as important and that we're all the same, and it's not about who's an umpire and who's a player, but that we are people too. And I really wanted to share a lot of those learnings and thoughts and human stories and attributes with the reader.
Right, and I want to share this with our viewers that Mr. Simon Toffel has shared this. He has elaborated this in the first chapter of Finding the Gaps, the book that he has written. If you talk about your book, sir, Finding the Gaps, Transferable Skills to be the Best You Can Be. Very, very deep topic. You want to share the highlights of the book?
Oh, look, quite simply, it's about taking what I've learnt, getting to the top in the game of cricket umpiring and how to stay there, and about how we've made plenty of mistakes and how we learn through the right attitude and good self-discipline and being able to cope with setbacks and handle pressure and all those sorts of things that sort of help us be the best that we can be. But look, just super proud to be able to call on a gentleman by the name of Sachin Tendulkar, someone who we have a very respectful relationship and friendship with, and to be able to have him write the foreword was a wonderful element to the book. but I really wanted to, I suppose, help the next generation of professionals. And it's not just about cricket, it's about whatever we do. And yes, it is a bit of a deep topic, but I really wanted to share what worked, what didn't work, as I said, how we got to the top and stayed there for a while, and really just try to make sure that people could relate to the life skills. Because university schools are great on teaching the technical skills, but I've learned so much more about myself and about what it takes to handle myself on tour and recover from the really deep lows of my worst game in England, or my worst test match, and how I've dealt with the pressures of a World Cup final that we talked about earlier on, and share some of those tips and tools with the readers.
A key aspect, Simon, you discuss in the book is the leadership, which is considered supreme, especially in cricket or in whatever sport. What is the definition of a good leader or a leader according to you?
Well, for me, leadership's all about, can you inspire people to follow you? So in a lot of ways, leadership is about the followers. It's not necessarily about yourself. And I think what's really important, in the book I talk about 3 or 4 captains who have different leadership styles, and it's about adapting your leadership style to the situation that's in front of you. So there's no one size fits all. And in the book I talk about Virat Kohli, Mark Taylor, Mahela Jayawardene. It's about inspiring your followers to do just that, to follow you and to go places where they've never been before and to trust you, and deliver their best and to bring out their best. And the best leaders bring out the best in their followers. There's no question about that. And I've seen some great leaders on the cricket field and also off the cricket field. And George Bailey, for one, has got a very interesting take on leadership in this space, where he talks about leadership being a good captain between the hours of 6 p.m. and 11 a.m. Not between 11 a.m. and 6 p.m., but it's off the field. And if you think about that as in the workplace, it's about caring for our staff, it's about caring for our people and making sure that they're okay, and getting their trust and support to go the extra mile for you. Just tremendous leadership anecdotes, stories and lessons to be learned.
But how will you rate MS Dhoni as a leader, or maybe Sourav Ganguly, Steve Waugh, Mark Taylor? You mentioned Imran Khan, Mahela Jayawardene, Ricky Ponting, list is endless. They all were contrasting personalities. They and all had different styles of leading their teams, and all of them are considered biggest captains for their respective teams, for their respective.
Sure, and that doesn't make them right or wrong. You're absolutely correct, because they're all different people. And I think one of the things that we want to see in our leaders is authenticity. We want to see leaders who are themselves and all themselves, all the time, and that they're not just pretending to be something that they're not. So I think it's really important that you be the person that you are. And I saw that in another leader in Graham Smith as well. But if you look at MS Dhoni, he has a great cricket brain. He has an ability to be in front of the game and to also understand what the opposition doesn't want you to do, and he tends to do the opposite. But he also has tremendous faith in his players and himself. He's been known as a great finisher with the bat chasing runs for a long, long time. But he's also got an astute cricket brain where he can tactically think about where the game is going and try to get in front of the game in that way. And I think those are the sorts of qualities that MS is providing. And you never really see MS front and centre promoting himself or promoting him trying to be the centre of attention. It's about his team, his results as a team, and his players who, I suppose, capture most of the spotlight. So he's a quiet achiever in that way, and we would call that probably level 5 leadership in the corporate world. But he's also a very quietly spoken gentleman. But when he wants to get a point across, he can also, be quite loud when he needs to be. But he's a challenge, and I really respect the way that he's captained, and he goes about his business without too much fuss.
Who, according to you, has been the greatest captain?
For me, Mark Taylor. I think is probably one of the best captains that I've had the pleasure to officiate. Mark he had the ability to put the team first. You might remember he declared at 3:34 the same score as Bradman against Pakistan. to give himself and his team enough time to bowl the opposition out. He could have broken Bradman's record, but he put the game and the victory first, which is a great quality. He's also a great thinker, again, also one that's in front of the game, but he's also prepared to lose the game to win it. And I think tactically that's a very great positive way to play cricket. And the other thing that stuck out to me, Abhishek, was he was very constructive in his captain's reports on umpires' performances. You know, he didn't just say, oh, the umpire missed 2 caught behinds and 3 LBWs. He talked about concentration, focus, the ability to communicate effectively with the players, and gave different insights and feedback that actually allowed us to feed forward and improve what we were doing. And I think that showed us that he was a real student of the game and cared about what he wrote. So those attributes were standouts in my view.
Okay. And also, Simon, you mentioned this in your book also. We want to know from you about sports psychology also, how sports should be played to earn the numero uno status.
Look, I think sport's a wonderful teacher. And in the terms of psychology, look, not only do you have to play a test match or to play a lot of sport, you have to be fit mentally, but you also have to be fit physically. But sport teaches us how to deal with setbacks. It also teaches us how to deal with success. And success is never achieved in sport on your own. There are either people who are coaching you, training you, providing you feedback, or assisting you. So sport's a wonderful teacher in that respect. It also builds character and also develops and shows character. And what's really important in today's world is that we actually become people of good character. You know, we spend a lot of time on social media or working through mediums like this, but it's really important that we're able to build relationships, to add value to a team. And for me, it's about character and chemistry, you know, developing and building character, but also chemistry about succeeding in a team environment and bringing skills and giving back to the team. And sport does that very well. Sport also teaches you about being honest and fair income with yourself, and also having lots of integrity around the way that you play. Not just following the rules, but following the spirit. And that's about integrity.
Right, very nicely put forward by you. But what do you want to tell to a 10-year-old if he's watching you? Why sports, why playing sports, why outdoor activities are important? What do you want to tell him? Well, because, for example, if he's a couch potato.
Yeah, look, I think it's important to get off that couch for a start and get active, because sport's about, it teaches you great life lessons. Not only does it look after your health and does it build all sorts of hard skills and being able to run and to catch and to bowl and to bat, but it builds such tremendous soft skills about how to cope in a team environment, how to lead, how to think strategically, how to learn and develop a skill, how to operate and exist within a team environment, and to build some friendships and mates. And for me, you know, cricket's about mateship too. It's about building friends throughout your career that are lifelong friends and relationships that will stand the test of time. And you know, in my journey, I've made so many friends from all different corners of the world, young, old, black, white, different religions, different countries. And to be able to build the relationships, and I learned off a great guy by the name of David Shepherd, you know, what it was like to try and build some of those relationships across all those different barriers. So as a 10-year-old, you know, I think back to the kids that I started playing cricket with, and I keep in touch with them today. I think back to my first cricket coach, who was just a great man and taught me some really good lessons about how to carry myself and what to do, what not to do, how to speak, how to use my manners, and look after myself. And all those skills, sport and cricket offers.
Who are your best friends in cricket fraternity? Do you still speak to them?
Well, it was only last week that I reached out to Harbhajan Singh and Virendra Sehwag, who had birthdays. So it was good to reconnect with them and to drop them a note and to say hello. But look,
through Twitter, through social media, or
no, through WhatsApp. So I'm very lucky to have their phone numbers, and we connect whenever we can.
Last two questions, Simon, before we wind it up. What are your off-field interests? You spend a lot of time with the family?
I try to. I love watching a bit of comedy, so I like sort of relaxing that way with the family. But I also enjoy fishing. I went fishing the other day out on my boat, which I'm very lucky to be able to do in Australia. I love playing golf. I love my cars. So I recently bought a new car, and I've been able to enjoy driving that. So I enjoy motorsport and also driving reasonably fast cars, funny enough. But yeah, those things are great. But more importantly, to be able to do them with my kids or with some people and family around us. And that's been probably one of the hardest things with the COVID lockdowns and the pandemic is the restriction on being able to, communicate and network with people that you really like and love.
And thank God, and cases are going down now. And but seriously, Simon, multi-talented you are. You have so many interests, and you do so many things. Last question: when did you learn to speak Hindi? And you also want to say a few words? I probably started learning Hindi when I first went to India in the early 2000s, and my first trip to India started off quite poorly actually, because I arrived at the airport but there was no one there to pick me up. So preparing the way that I would normally prepare, and the tip that probably Daryl Harper taught me early on in my career was to learn some of the local language. So learning how to count to 6, egg, tin, char, punch, right through to 10. But counting to 6 in the local language is really important. Learning how to say yes and no, please and thank you, kripya, dhanyawad. Learning how to... Can you speak the entire sentence also in Hindi?
Oh, the bottom of pushna. I think what's really important is that you're able to say bus, enough, or cello, let's go. And also the swear words. It's really important to understand the swear words and know what the players are saying about you. I find really helpful.
You can't say that here.
No.
Well, thank you, Simon, so much. Entire half an hour talking to you has been like a learning session for me. Such a great inspiration, such a great personality you are, Simon. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving us your precious time to DD India. Thank you.
Dhanyawad. Shukriya. Mehrbani.